Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Rider Rebuild, coming to you with episode 5 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we're building up more of this mystery. We're starting to get a little bit of our questions answered, but I think we're getting more questions than we're getting answers. The one thing we do need to address is the cliffhanger we were left off on last week, which is whether or not Soichi works for Faust. Well, turns out that was a big ploy. He doesn't. It turns out that Misora at some point was actually captured by Faust, and Soichi broke her out and actually stole the panel and the full bottles along with her. So that leads the audience to have more questions than they had before. So if Soichi was powerful enough to break her out, obviously he does have some sort of power, there's still pieces of the puzzle that we're missing here. Now, admittedly, we're told that Misora is supposed to be keeping a low profile and staying there at the cafe because Faust is still on the lookout for her, given that she has the power to purify those pure bottles. But the idea of her streaming, putting her face out there, kind of negates that. I imagine if they have the ability to go ahead and turn humans into monsters, then surely they can track somebody's IP, and unless they're masking it really well, which is something they haven't covered, it's not that hard to figure that they could track down who Mitan is if she looks exactly like the person they captured before. So the really big piece of information that we get out of the beginning is that Soichi was the guy on Mars who found Pandora's box and brought it back to Earth. Not only is he that guy, he's also the same astronaut who activated said box and caused the Skywall incident to occur. Now, why he did that, he's not entirely certain of that. Was he under some sort of influence? Was he transformed by the power of the box, and that's why he has this transformative power that we're shown? Who knows? That's still something that we need to be given. Now, there's two possible answers that I can take from this. One is that possibly maybe a Martian switched places with him, and that's why we see he has that power here on Earth. The other, more logical answer is yes, the power of Pandora's box did something to him, and that's why he has the abilities that we saw in earlier episodes. Now, we'll give credit where credit is due. We're moving forward with the narrative, and we're not getting too much characterization here, although the characterization we do get is kind of hypocritical to what we were shown last week, and I'll get into that. The first thing I want to talk about is this new information that we have about Sento. So we're told this week that Sento had an identity previous to what we were told. After Sawa gets a tip-off on somebody who says they know Sento, we find that his name was originally Sato Taro. This information is given to us by a character named Tatsuya, who apparently performed with Sento in a band previous to his amnesia. Now again, amnesia in a Kamen Rider series, that's something that's not new. This goes back to Kamen Rider Agito, wherein Soichi Sugami had a different name than what he was given and told everybody throughout the show. That's a big plot point, but it's not too much that would take away from your enjoyment of the series, just saying that's something that's happened before. Although the major difference is that revelation in Kamen Rider Agito comes fairly late in the series, whereas here we're told this in episode 5. It's barely been a month into the series, so I wonder why we're getting this out of the way now. Now thankfully, Tatsuya does have a lot of information to go ahead and give us. He tells us the date of the disappearance, which coincides with the date that Sento was found by Soichi, and of course we want to get more into this, but we have to have our first fight of the episode, which is actually our first real face-off between Build and Bloodstark. Now clearly there's a power difference between the two of them, and that Bloodstark seemingly has no trouble with Sento. Really, it's very obvious that he's gauging his power. I would think that Bloodstark was actually there, present along with Night Rogue, when they experimented on Sento when he was captured by Faust initially. The interesting thing that we hear out of Bloodstark is that he labels Sento's power, as far as his Rider Kick goes, as having a hazard level of 3.2, which is interesting considering we've never heard of this level before. Now, cinematography-wise, I do appreciate the uptick in how the Rider Kick looks. Having it go straight into the kick and you kind of see the effects in the background looks better on screen, and it's easier to take in. Now, admittedly, Sento has a lot to consider since he's been given all of this new information about himself, about Soichi, but the scenes that we go into after this have a bit of mood whiplash considering everything that we're seeing here. I imagine Sento would have been a bit more contemplative of all the information that we just got, but then we go from that to being very bright and chipper and almost kid-like in the way that he's messing with the full bottles trying to come up with a new best match. Along with that, I was praising Ryuga last week for the kind of care that he took in caring for somebody else and their family, namely what happened with Nabeshima. Here in this episode, he seems a lot more selfish than we saw last week, and that contradicts a lot of things that I was thinking about his character. Now, this does make for a better story, but I'm not sure that makes for him being a better hero. Now later on we do get a rematch between Bloodstark and Build, and we see that Bloodstark notices that Build's anger is actually fueling his power. Now I imagine this plays in a lot to the way that they're looking at creating the Smash, so some bit of emotion must weigh into the factors. And of course, Sento, not knowing any better, is giving them all the information that they want. Sento, for as smart as he is, isn't thinking critically. which makes me believe maybe he wasn't a physicist like he believes he was. That buys into the whole thing of telling us he was some sort of guitar player or band member before he had that amnesia episode. Now, the great thing about this fight as it goes into a battle between the Press Smash and other Guardians there under the control of Faust is that we get very decent bike action. Really, I haven't seen bike action this well choreographed since Kamen Rider Kuga. Mind you, that was all the way back in the year 2000. But at that point, they were trying to liven up the series since they had been on break for such a long time, and in that series, it really stood out. Here, because we've had such a dry spell with other Rider series not really having their main characters use their vehicles, not be Kamen Riders, that yes, it's very welcome to see Sento and Ryuga using their bikes and actually making them part of the battle. Now, of course, the show is going to sell us a toy, and the toy they're going to sell us this week has to do with Build's new best match, Nin Nin Comic, which combines the power of a ninja and a comic book. Why those two things go together, your guess is as good as mine, but that fight actually got out of the way very quickly. It's quickly displayed what kind of power that Nin Nin Comic has, and then that fight's done with. It actually gets back to the story very quickly. Now, I wonder if we're going to see more of this in other subsequent episodes, since we still have to balance out the idea of telling a story versus selling a product. After that no contest fight, we see that Ryuga's selfishness really comes to a head because he's still obsessed with the idea of clearing his name no matter what the cost to anybody else. So he kind of sacrifices Tatsuya and turns him back into a Smash after Sento has helped him out, with the idea that potentially, based off Misora's theory, that a Smash that hasn't been fully defeated might lead them back to their lair. Now, on a technical level, that makes sense. I actually can't fault him for that, but the manner in which he's doing that is very selfish. Of course, this decision by Ryuga will come to a head in next week's episode when Sento confronts him about that, as well as confronting Bloodstark again now that he is fully aware that he was experimented on by Faust. So all in all, this episode had a lot of good going for it. I love the bike action, I love the development of the story. I'm still wondering about the characterization. The mood whiplash was kind of weird. I hope that in other episodes they've got a better lid on that and a better idea of where they're going with the pacing of the episode. Again, I'm not fully convinced that I like this series, but I'm still interested enough to keep watching. But those, of course, were my thoughts in the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought, so let's go ahead and talk about this. First off, Bloodstark. Who exactly is he? We see he's not Utsumi or Gentoku since they were both there present during the fight, so who do you think he actually is? Secondly, Misora. Do you think she should be streaming if she's in hiding, or it's fine that she's doing that? And lastly, the bike action. Do you appreciate that we're seeing more bike action, or would you prefer just more straight up fighting? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 5 of Rider Rebuild for episode 5 of Kamen Rider Build, Dangerous Identity. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.